Okay, so we're going to get started on sorting the basics for our inference internal. And again, this is the scaffold or kind of the backbone that you would have to have and understand to be able to get, to the achieved, and then this is what you'll build on to get to your merit and excellence as well. So it's important for everybody. Now, the very first part, like most of our internals, is going to be about writing a good question. And what we've talked about in the notes that we did earlier was that we need 4 key things in the question. One of them being the variable, the thing that we're actually going to be comparing and measuring, and the characteristic you are grouping by, which is basically just the groups. Tell me if it's male and female or, anything else. Identify the population parameters. So here we want to make sure you understand what the population is. And the last thing for us is going to be our statistic. Make sure that you clarify whether you're going to do the mean or median. And we often include where the data is sourced from as well to help deal with our population parameter. So just it helps to identify that if you know where the data is coming from as well. So if we look at our first question here, if we are going to think about defining the variable, first thing we're going to look at is a rugby situation. So we've been given a data set of real data from the super rugby players, and so we've got our data link is given to us here. There's also the spreadsheet you can download to run an insight here. And this is basically all the information that's been given to us. So they tell us what country the players are from, New Zealand or South Africa. They tell us what position they play, forward or back. And they tell us the weight of the rugby player in kilograms and the height of the rugby player in meters. And so if I was going to be writing a question about this data set, there's kind of 2 things that I could be looking at comparing, and that would be the height or the weight. That would be the variable that I would want to look at. But my groups, I've got 2 different categories here. So these could be the variable, either of them. You wouldn't want to do both, but you could pick one or the other. And there's 2 possibilities for groups as well. We could compare the height of New Zealand and South African players, or we could compare the weight of, forwards and backs or anything like that. So you've got some variability in there for what you want to do. And again, that's how it would be in the assessment. You've got to pick what you want. So if we look at this question they've written, if we decide that we're going to look at the weight, what is the difference between the median weight of forwards in the New Zealand and South African rugby teams and the median weights of the backs in New Zealand and South African rugby teams? So that is my variable. My group here, we're obviously using in this case, because we're comparing both New Zealand and South Africans, we are looking actually at the forwards and backs, but they're taking everyone in the data set. So the group that we're comparing is the position forward and back. And our population parameter here is going to be the data of the Super Rugby players, and it is both the New Zealand and South African. So we would say in the New Zealand and South African Super Rugby teams, that's our population, because we're looking at everybody on those teams. Our data set, we're saying where it's from. The data set is from this website. And then our last thing, of course, is to make sure that we get our statistic, whether we're doing the mean or the median. And you can see here they've selected to do the median. And again, we can make that judgment a little bit better if you take a look at the data and decide, but for kind of naturally distributed things, we often are going to use the median. The last thing we really want to make sure that we do is define our variables. So we kind of have a few key things we need to make sure we do. Number 1 would be writing the big question. Number 2 would be defining what the variables are. And so here you're going to go back up and investigate your data, go to that website, Rugby Sidestep Central, or look at the information given to us, and make sure you understand what's being measured. So if we're going to compare the weights here, then let's think about what weight is. So to define our variables, we might say the weight, which is what we're measuring, is the weight of rugby players in kilograms, and so I'm defining what that is, raw weight of rugby players in kilograms, and that is in fact coming out of the information here. And the position, because that's the other thing we're using, is the player's normal position on the rugby field, either forward or back. So we've defined both the variable and the groups here. And so this is helping, clarify exactly what your report's going to be about. So you're looking at comparing the weight of rugby players, and you're comparing those that play forward compared to those that play back. And in this case in particular as well, we're looking at New Zealand and South African Super Rugby players. So, the next thing for us is then going to be looking at our analysis and our data set. So we'll get started on that next.